Hi, I'm Dawn Montefusco, life coach for writers and creatives, and this is Write Your True Story, how to use your story to grow your business, inspire millions, and leave a legacy. And today we have literally one of my favorite people who I tend to online stalk, but that's okay. Her name is Samantha Bennett. Originally from Chicago, Samantha Bennett is a writer, speaker, actor, teacher, and creativity productivity specialist. She's the author of the best-selling Get It Done: From Procrastination to Creative Genius in 15 Minutes a Day, which Seth Godin called an instant classic, essential reading for anyone who wants to make a ruckus. Her latest book, which is, again, awesome, I have it, Start Right Where You Are, How Little Changes can make a big difference for overwhelmed procrastinators, frustrated overachievers, and recovering perfectionists. She's the creator of theorganizederartistcompany.com, dedicated to helping creative people get unstuck, helping them to focus and move forward on their goals. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Dawn. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, obviously, I chose you for all of the obvious in your bio. But tell us a little more about what you do and any projects that you want to talk about and tell us about.
So I mostly teach online. I help creatives, get unstuck from whatever way it is that they're stuck, because mostly the reason a creative person isn't moving forward isn't because they don't know what to do. It isn't because they don't have a good idea. It isn't because they're not capable of doing it. It isn't because they're lazy. It isn't because they're procrastinators. It's because they've gotten tricked into thinking there's a right way.
Ooh.
And they're worried about not doing it the right way, right? So then they get paralyzed in this sort of I don't know land, right? And I think that's something that school does to us. You know, in school, the way you succeed is by knowing the answers in advance. Yeah. That's how you do well, often by even knowing the questions in advance and knowing the answers in advance, right? But life is not like that. Creativity is not like that. Parenting's not like that. Being a friend isn't like that. Life is not like that. So what I do is really help creative people tune into their own inner wisdom, their own completely wackadoodle way of doing things, and lean on that, because there isn't a right way. There's just your way.
Oh, I don't know if you know this, but I was an actor.
Yeah.
I was, and then in NYU, and then I just for some reason, didn't flow with it. It stressed me out too much. But I did start writing, and I was more the poet creator. And then went to get my MFA in creative writing, eventually was a counselor and a life coach. And my question is, before we go into the list of questions I have, do you think it's easier for a creative to tell a true story about struggle than it would be, say, a lawyer or a doctor? That as creatives, we almost get permission to be wackadoodle?
Yeah, I think we do. I think we also, we were the weird kids.
Yeah.
Right? We were the weird kids in our family. We were the weird kids at school. And because art is about perspective, right? It's about having a different point of view on things than everybody else does. So, and when that's been your sort of special talents your whole life, I think there is a certain comfort level in that maybe other people don't have.
Yeah.
But I think everybody's a creative genius. Not everybody's artistic, right? In the same way that not everybody's musical, but everybody is a creative genius. And I think everybody is a storyteller. Yes. It may not be in the traditional way that we think of storytelling, but some people tell great jokes. Some people tell stories in numbers. I have a friend who he's just started doing public speaking, and he's really trying. It's so sweet. But really, his genius is in numbers. Like, you show him an Excel spreadsheet, and he can tell you the story of what's happening in these numbers. And I'm like, what? Like, what? Can you, what? It's like he speaks some mysterious language, but it's true. And he's always been like that. Numbers have always spoken to him in that way. So he tells stories in numbers. Visual people tell stories visually. Photographers tell stories, in photographs. It just depends on on who you are. So, and the other little thing that comes to mind is, I don't know that it's easier for anybody.
Good answer. Good answer. That brings me to the next one. How has storytelling and vulnerable storytelling helped you attract your tribe? So really the more difficult stories to tell actually probably became the way you got closer to the people who want to work with you.
Yeah. I mean, so as you said, my background's in theater. I was one of those, theater kids. I went to theater camp. I studied theater in college, left college to go get a job at the Second City. Like I was an actor, and I was a fairly successful actor. I still work as an actor sometimes. And the whole thing with acting is being emotionally alive and truthful in the moment, right? And listening. Those are really kind of the two things you have to do, is be present, especially emotionally, and listen. And so when I sort of started to pivot more toward entrepreneurship, I just ran my business exactly the way I'd run my acting career. Nice. I didn't know how to show up any other way, really. It never occurred to me that there would be some more professional version of me. Perhaps to my detriment, but that quality is what really engaged me. And it's the thing that's kept me in love with entrepreneurship all this time, is that it's like the world's greatest art project.
Totally. Yeah.
It like engages me completely. And marketing is all storytelling. Sales is all storytelling. Teaching is all storytelling. Like every part of it plugs into the thing that I love and do best. So it was a natural jump. And definitely, I think the more people give money to people they trust.
Yes.
Right? If people don't trust you, they're not going to give you money.
Yes.
And we as human beings have excellent bullshitometers. We're pretty, we're rarely surprised when somebody turns out to be a crook or a thief.
Absolutely.
Right? We might be shocked, but we're rarely surprised.
Totally.
You always have that feeling of like, oh, yeah, I kind of concede. Yeah, I kind of knew that was going to go that way.
Oh, yeah.
I had a feeling, right?
Oh, yeah. A quick caveat to that, a accountability buddy friend of mine and a colleague, he was getting a client to sign up. And the first time he comes back from that client, he goes, oh my God, that guy's bananas, right? And it was really a big client. He wasn't sure if he wanted to work with them, and it was a partnership on a gig. Next time he comes back, I said, well, how'd it go this time? He goes, I think he's on crack. He acts like he's all jittery and stuff. So the third time he comes back, I said, so how'd it go? And he's like, okay. The fourth time he goes, oh my God, he totally turned out to be a complete flake in this and that. I said, you mean the banana crack guy? And he goes, I knew from the start. I was like, well, I knew from the start, but I figured you had to go through your process. And that's what we usually do until we realize we can trust ourselves.
Well, that's right. And truly, you really can. I mean, well, there's a little proviso there, but in general, in my experience, the way things start is the way they go.
Yes.
As things begin, so they go. So when things start and it's weird, or there's miscommunications or a lot of knees and elbows, like, get out now. It's not going to get better. Just be graceful, be sweet, but just get out. But in general, but if things like seem good, they flow, it's, they have a good sense of humor, whatever, like.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do want to say that as an actor, one of the things you touched upon was, people always think that when you're acting, you're lying somehow because they don't really understand the business. But true actors listen, like you said, and they're present. And there is a sense of trust, that's built. And I feel like and this brings me to my next one, you really have put yourself out there with some of your true stories, with some of who you are as a human being. And I mean, I can't thank you enough for some of it. When you wrote that post on Facebook, it doesn't just have to be in a book, right? You put it out there on your website, you put it in your Facebook, you do it in your emails. But that one time you talked about depression, and you talked about a very specific kind of depression. You had something about monster dinosaur. Wasn't there a quote in there?
Very good. Yes. The post was called Throwing Pebbles at Dinosaurs.
That's right. That's right.
And I talked about atypical depression, which is what I have. I don't know why they call it atypical depression. It's very typical. That's a lot. It's very common, rather. Yeah, it was really, thank you for saying that. It's one of the things that people remember most and has been like the most shared and the most quoted, and people have come back to me a lot about it, and I'm delighted. It wasn't my favorite thing to write. It was caused by, I had had a little pit, I'd fallen into a little pit of depression. And it hadn't lasted very long, but I was really shocked at how swift the descent was. Yeah. That like I had gone from being mostly fine and manageable. I mean, we all have days, and sometimes it's a little worse and sometimes it's a little better. But this got really bad really fast. Mm-hmm. And I was doing all the things I knew to get out of it, but that's like throwing pebbles at dinosaurs, right? You know, and everybody has all this well-meaning advice, you know, take a walk, get a massage, do something nice for someone else. That, I'm like, can I swear on this? It's like, fuck you.
Yes, totally.
You have no idea what we're dealing with in here. And to me, that's always the sign of depression, actually, just as a public service announcement. Yeah. When I'm just in a blue mood or having a tough time or really tired, if I do go for a walk, get a massage, do something nice for someone else, I feel better, right? Those things can have a transformative effect when it's depression, the mood. When it's depression, the condition, I don't care if you're the Queen of Sheba, nothing's gonna help.
Absolutely.
So when it lifted, I felt this incredible relief. I was almost like euphoric. I was so glad it was gone. And so I just wrote a little post about it and about how hard it is when you're on the inside of it. And the trick of depression is that it makes you think it'll never go away.
Totally.
It makes you think you'll never go away. It also makes you think that anything you've ever thought of as happiness before was just a lie.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? Like you were just kidding yourself. You're a fraud, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it can often be a fatal disease, right? Because it makes you think it's permanent. And that's why people kill themselves. It's not that they can't take the pain. We can take all kinds of pain. It's just that we think the pain's never going to end.
Never going to end. And when you say atypical, something in there reminded me of this, because you're very obviously extroverted to a degree. You know, you're out there, you're talking, and you love people, and everything you write about is just about people and loving them and helping them. And wasn't it something like atypical depression is like something about how just because you're presenting in a certain way in front of people, because you're happy to be in front of people ultimately.
It's one of the characteristics of atypical depression is when you're out with people, you actually seem more or less fine, you know? And it's one of the benefits too of not exactly being a member of the Happy Childhood Club is the ability to compartmentalize.
Totally.
I can have all kinds of crap going on and still show up, and show must go on, right? I can still show up and deliver when I have to. So it's not the kind of depression where like you're laying on the couch for days at a time and crying and everybody feels sorry for you and comes knocking like, are you okay?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I really just want to emphasize for the audience that this kind of storytelling, this kind of authentic storytelling from the heart is messy in some ways. And I think that's why some people, like some people I know, you know, they're like, oh, I can't really tell my story, even though they're writing great books and or they're doing creative work, their persona and their professional world, they think, oh, yay, hi, Kitty.
Super. Hi, Kitty.
Oh, what a pretty cat.
Yeah.
Part of the family. Is that the irony, though, is that since we all are human, that when we do take that seeming risk, the result that we get is, in my opinion, is the opposite of the fear that we have, which leads me to, have you ever had doubts about first sharing that story or first getting there?
Oh, for sure. I felt really, and it was part of what made me do it. I've been at this long enough now that I know that whenever I have that like, oh no feeling, that means I have to.
Yes, totally.
Right. So, but I had a lot of shame and a lot of resistance around it. But I really felt a responsibility, because I am kind of a public person, to talk about it. Because I was like, you know, if I had a bum ankle, or diabetes, or, you know, needed to wear glasses all the time, like I wouldn't feel embarrassed about that. You know, I have a condition that I was born with. It's a complicated condition. It's misunderstood. It's a global thing. Like it's a physical thing. It's an emotional thing. It's a chemical thing. It's a spiritual thing. Like you kind of have to come at it from all angles.
Totally.
It's very misunderstood. And I just felt like any opportunity I have to just normalize it, to just say like, yeah, it's a thing. And I will also add, it's not an excuse.
Right. Excellent.
Right.
Yes.
And what I really noticed about that post, particularly the post version on Facebook, is, a ton of people were like, oh my God, me too. Oh my God, me too. Oh my God, me too. But then there were plenty of other people who were like, wow, I've never really understood what it's like. And that's hard for us to remember too, that, we're always so inside of our experience that we think, well, everybody must feel this way, at least sometimes. And to remember that, in fact, people who've never had depression,
they don't have a reference point.
They can't even imagine. They really can't even imagine. So yeah, they're not being dismissive. They just have no idea.
Yeah. Situational depression, I think, creeps up as you age, though, in terms of divorce and death and things like that. So I think everybody gets a little bit of a taste of it eventually.
For sure. I hope not, but yes, for sure. And there's things to welcome about it. I mean, I've learned, when depression really hits, I get a very grim sense of humor that can be kind of hilarious.
Yes.
Kind of dark. And I get much more ruminative. So I use it to sort of poke around places, especially in my business and my life, that I might not, I tend to kind of sunshine over things. Like, I'm sure it'll be fine. Let's just go. And to be more a little bit like, is this really okay? Because everything sucks. Maybe I should change this. And
yes, totally. Would you be where you were today if you decided not to tell your true stories? Do you think?
There isn't another version of me leading a more or less successful version of my life, so it's a little hard to tell. No, and I will say, particularly with the new book, particularly with Start Right Where You Are, I showed a draft of that to a very dear friend of mine, and she's such a dear friend of mine that she read it and said, this is fantastic and it's not done.
Oh wow.
And I was like, what do you mean? And she says, there needs to be more you need to tell more of your personal story. And I was like, oh God, no. And she's like, oh yeah.
Yes.
And she really held my feet to the fire about it.
That's the best part. I love that. I mean,
I was so mad.
What happens next,
Yeah. And, but that's how we connect. Stories are the bridge between people. That's how we connect, right? That's how we learn best. That's how we feel less alone in the world. It's how we transform. It's how we get inspired. It's how we develop our values and our morals. It's, stories. I had a wonderful teacher in college, Dwight Conkergood, who's dead now, but he used to say that he thought that we should be called Homo narratus rather than Homo erectus, because our distinguishing characteristic was not that we walked upright, it was that we told stories.
Totally. That's awesome.
Right?
And we can share stories. Like, I share your Facebook posts and I share the stories in your book when I say, oh, you should read Sam's new book. And she talks about her struggles and how she got to where she is and just about what creativity means to her. And it's been amazing of a journey for her. And then when I say it that way versus, oh, here's a book on being more creative, people go, oh, cool, and it takes on a whole new world.
And I will say this, especially to the coaches and teachers out there, notice that the only thing anybody remembers at all, if they remember anything, which they won't, the only thing they're going to remember is a really great teaching story.
It's true.
They're not going to remember anything you say. They're not going to remember anything they say. But if you can tell a really great teaching story, that will stick with them.
I even had a student. For 7 years, I taught at-risk youth in a college program, but they were high school dropouts in this college program. And I taught them life coaching skills and writing. Years later, one of the 3,000 students that came through the program followed me around because I was doing spoken word, and we sat down one day, and he was 18. I had known him since he was 15. And he goes, I don't really remember much about what went on, but I do remember you did tend to tell good stories. And I'm like, you didn't remember any of the life skills? He goes, oh, I do. But I remember some of the quotes that, you did more. And I was like, wow, that's really remarkable all that time. At least I was entertaining,
I used to do a lot of work with a theater company called LA Theater Works that does full cast productions for the radio. Uh-huh. And they get a lot of Hollywood stars to do it. So it was really fun. I got to do plays with Richard Dreyfuss and Charles Durning and Ed Asner and Ed O'Neill and tons of really great, amazing people. And years later, I ran into a woman who had been a stage manager on a number of those shows. And you know how it is when you're on set or in rehearsal, there's a lot of lag time. So I would usually bring needlepoint with me. Yeah. because you can't read or you can't be distracted, but
Yeah.
I do better when my hands are busy. So I would bring needlepoint. And so years have passed. I run into her and she's like, oh my gosh, Sam, I'm so good to see you. Da, 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 da. Hi. She goes, I think about you all the time. She's like, I remember you so well. And I'm like, really? Like, because I'm such a great actress, really. And she goes, yes, because I remember us talking about your needlepoint, and you talked about how your grandmother taught you that it should be as pretty on the back as it is on the front, so you never had any of those strings like hanging out. I'm like, okay. But then, and it did take, I was a little like, ouch. Wow, 15 plays or whatever, and she remembers my needlepoint. But on the other hand, I thought, that's, my grandmother did teach me that.
Yes, we remember those things, especially when they're passed down, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So.
Do you think that, speaking of that, like when people remember I remembered your Facebook post, do you think that the internet has given entrepreneurs a little more leeway so they don't have to just write a book every time, that they can use social media to connect authentically and build relationship that way through story?
Absolutely. And on the one hand, you have a little bit of a problem just because of the oversaturation level, like there's so much out there. On the other hand, like with most markets, most of it's crap.
Yes.
So you really only have to be this much better than the person next to you
to
be memorable. And in my experience, creative people are. Like your version of a C is pretty much everybody else's version of an A.
Yes.
And you can be so wide open about how you do it. I mean, again, do you like to tell stories visually? Do you like to tell them in person? You can have meetups. You can have a running group. You can have a tea party in your house. You can drive around. You have it in a car. You can have it as a commuting. I don't know. You could do anything. Like anything you like to do. Yes. You can use as a vehicle to build your platform.
As long as it's genuine. And when I say that, I want to go back to something you did that literally I was telling my boyfriend, I go, look at her, a few weeks ago. Because I said, you know what she calls this sort of like Facebook live show, this video thing she's doing about spirituality, and she's writing prayer and she's helping people get connected spiritually. He goes, what? I said, she calls it unscripted spiritual stuff. How awesomely genuine and authentic is that title? There's nothing hiding behind that title. I love it. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell the audience about that.
Thank you for bringing that up. I have to, and I will say that I went into kicking and screaming. Right. It's probably been 2 or 3 years now that people started to say to me, like, you should talk more about spiritual stuff. Like, you're really kind of a spiritual teacher and you should really, and I was like, I am not. And even, people are like, I don't know, Sam, when you talk about God, like, you're not talking about the same thing everybody else is talking about. Like, you should really get this out there. And I was like, oh God. Help me.
For the creative, because we're the creator, right? The creator, the creator, spirit. Yeah. So how'd you finally pull the trigger?
Well, I realized my resistance to it was strong enough that it meant that I had to do it.
Oh, nice.
Because then I also get this thing like, well, aren't you an actor? Like, aren't you just a natural on camera? You're like, okay. It's not what you think, but okay. So finally, I just didn't want to do it enough that I finally decided to do it. And I was terrified. I was really the first, to show up live on camera with no agenda, no teaching plan, no sermon, nothing to sell. Mm-hmm. Nothing I want people to get, nothing. I show up with nothing, deliberately nothing. Mm-hmm. And I say hi to everybody and I start praying and I just say whatever seems to need to be said. Mm-hmm. And then we talk, people share on the chat and stuff, what's going on for them. And I try to make it so that, and I'm trying to do this just in my life in general, I try to make sure I'm not saying things I've said before.
Nice.
That's part of Sam Unscripted. Because, when you've been at this a long time, like I got a lot of patter.
Oh yeah.
There's the greatest hits.
Totally. We're Well, if you've been at it for any length of time, we all do. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, those are great. Those are, they're good teaching stories, priceless. But I try to tell stories I haven't told before, or say things in a different way, which means that it's often, not as smooth and not as articulate or not as interesting or not as a lot of things. But we just talk until we're done talking.
Like Johnny Carson when he first started, like all the talk shows are fun if they get him verklempt or embarrassed or anything. You're just like, yes,
Right. And I think it's the reason reality TV took off the way it did. Like, even though it was crappy and manipulated and we could tell it was so silly, but those real moments, once an episode, somebody would go,
yes,
like this, or go like this, or go like this, and we'd just go, oh, that's a real face.
Yes.
And it really made actors up the game. I mean, I was working in Hollywood when that started to happen, and
wow,
oh shit, we've got to, like, all of a sudden anything that looks like acting really started.
Right, yes.
Like the 20s, like, you got to be good.
You know what I love about this too is you have paved the way in a lot of ways of being authentic for years, really. And so when I saw that email that said unscripted, live, no agenda, no price, blah, 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 I absolutely 100% trusted that, and I think it's because of I know that you're going to tell the truth. I know that you like sharing, we trust people. We buy from people, not from businesses. Right. And so when I saw that, I remember thinking, wow, that's for real. And I wouldn't have thought that about just anybody, so I do want to say to people out there too, like, you don't have to jump off the diving board and tell the most crazy, gruesome struggle that you've gone through to start. If you're feeling, uncomfortable, you can just ease into it, right? Until you feel comfortable.
Absolutely. And what I would, the two things I sort of think of around this is, one is, because people get confused about sharing, especially their trauma, and there's a whole sort of conventional wisdom around, your mess is your message and everything, which is not untrue, but you need to be able to tell the story without crying.
Yes. Ooh, excellent.
Right? You need to have internalized the wisdom of the trauma. You can't just talk about the shit that's going on with you. I mean, some people can and do, I guess, but I don't find it very interesting. You need to have gone through what you've gone through, internalized the message and the wisdom of it, and be sharing it as a gift for someone else, not as an emotional beat off for you.
Totally.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but and the other distinction I make that is sometimes helpful for people is the distinction between the private and the personal.
Okay.
Right? So, because I think people get confused about this, like, what, I'm supposed to tell what I had for lunch, or like no one cares what you had for lunch. Yeah. That stuff that you think no one cares about, you're right, no one cares. And the example, but who you are as a person, how your identity works in the world, how your personality works in the world, how you respond to the world because of who you are, that's endlessly fascinating. Yeah, sure. We really want to know about that. Mm-hmm. So the example I sometimes give is, like, if we had a meeting and I was late, that would not be cool. And if we had a meeting and I was late and I came in and I'm like, I'm so sorry I'm late, John. I just, my cat and the shoes, and I've driven this Honda that's super old. But okay, now I am late and I am tedious.
Ah, yes.
This is a very bad combination.
Yeah.
If I walk in and I say, I'm so sorry I'm late, I was trying to put 5 pounds of sugar into a 4-pound bag before I left the house, and you would nod and smile like this because you go, oh yeah, I get it.
I'd be like, yeah, I get that.
I totally get it, right? I've done that before. Right? I get that you're that kind of, like, I can see that you're that kind of person. I get that's an authentic thing about you. It's still not great that you're late, but okay. And I've used what might be a problem as, again, a bridge, as an opportunity for you to get to know me a little bit more.
Yes.
That I'm likely to try and do too many things in too short of a time.
Yes, exactly. It's perfect. No, I love that. Yeah, someone was talking, Kevin Knievel, he's the speaker for LinkedIn, goes all over the world to talk about social relationships on LinkedIn. And he said similar, something about just what you're comfortable with, but there's a difference between, and maybe you can define this because he said it really quickly and I didn't have a chance, the difference between transparency and vulnerability. Be vulnerable, but we don't necessarily need you to be totally transparent.
Right.
Totally.
I mean, much like talking to children, you only want to give them the information that's going to help them.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Excellent.
Right. I mean, if a 3-year-old asks about sex, you don't want to be dishonest. You want to answer their question honestly, but appropriately to the information that they need at the time.
Excellent. Yeah. You're on the need to know basis, buddy.
Right. Need to know basis. So, there's a lot of this idea of total transparency, like, let me show you every detail of my life. I don't get that helps you very much.
Yeah. Yes. Agreed.
Right. So I'll share with you the stuff that I think is helpful to you, and not confusing.
Yeah.
Because now that I'm saying this, I think that's part of it too, is, the details of our lives are often very confusing. There's a lot of
yes,
and things that contradict and things that don't make sense and stuff. And we want to be presenting a sort of a clear story in the world.
I think that now that I think about it, totally, like when I share a true story with my tribe on an email blast or something, I'm also structuring it, right? Because I don't want it to be babbling. And I'm like, well, what am I really trying to tell them? And then if you do it right, I'm just thinking I get some clarity on it too. So the person telling the story gets to see, where was my moment of wisdom, where was my shift, and how does this help the person I'm telling the story to? Because as much as I'd like to say, as a writer and all that other stuff, oh yeah, just like tell your story, it'll be great. It's not. There's a reason that we have structure and how we even listen to story. There's a familiarity that we like, and there's a surprise that we like. And how do you balance that out? So I do appreciate you saying all of that you said.
Yeah, and the more you know about story and about writing, the better a business person you're going to be, because it all has to do with how the mind works. The art of the telling detail, the art of the open loop.
Yes.
I once did a speaking gig where I started out sort of telling them that I would tell them a certain story. It's kind of, this will explain what, like, okay, what's the telling detail? Do I need to give this detail? Like, this is the process in my head, right? How do I tell the story without it being too complicated? I told them I would tell them a story about my $80,000 email.
Oh yeah.
I sent an email that made $80,000. And then I did this whole big talk that was really good, and they were really with me. They were super into it. And then I was like, okay, so that's pretty much everything. And there's this like rumble, like this jungle, like I hear this sort of, no, wait, she hasn't. And finally somebody goes, the $80,000 email. And then I click the next slide. I'm like, oh, the $80,000 email. Right. Because I'd opened the loop and they were not going to let me out of the room until I told the story. Right. Which meant that I kept them the whole time.
I know. I love that.
And the power of intellectual curiosity. Right. People are always like, how do you write subject lines that are so, I'm like, all you have to do is stimulate their internet. We're such curious people.
Totally.
Anytime people go like, and even we do it all the time where you see those BuzzFeed things like, this celebrity, you'll never guess what happened next. And you're like, oh Jesus, now I have to click on it. There goes the next 15 minutes of my life. God.
So true. So true. Oh my God, Sam, this has been so much fun. I know I just learned a ton. And you walk your talk. And so it's just been so great. And I really want everyone to go out there, buy your books for sure. If you're stuck in a slump and you're creative and, so just for those people out there, because I get a lot of men and women over 40 who are, they're professional and they're doing okay, but they miss the creative side, but your books are fantastic and they should all run out and get that. And check you out on Facebook, because you do put your unscripted spiritual stuff up there. Yep. I think
I might start a new group for that. So for those videos, so they have sort of a special place to live and everybody knows where they are. But they're on the Organized Artist Company Facebook page. And if you want to go to startwritewhereyouare.com, Start Right Where You Are is great for the busy person who wants to be more creative, because the chapters are like 2 pages, like super tiny, like quick, and then action steps you can do right there. So it's very engaging. But even if you don't buy the book, go to startwritewhereyouare.com, because there's the Procrastination Domination Starter Kit.
Oh, that's right. It's awesome. Yes.
It's pretty great. And here's another tip about being authentic. Don't mess with what's working. Like, I recorded that thing like 5 or 6 years ago, and I keep thinking I should really redo that. But then every bit of feedback I get is like, oh my God, I love it so much. I'm like, great. I'm not even.
I just broke it open for my boyfriend. I said, here, you're going there and you're going to do her worksheet. We're not going to tell anybody here what it is on it, but it's a genius worksheet.
Well, it helps you decide which of your 137 ideas you should be working on. That's really what it does.
And I knew that it had been recorded. I said these words. It totally stands the test of time. You're going to love it.
Oh, thank you, Dawn.
It really does. So anyway, let's wrap up. Sam, it's been so great. Everybody go check her out. And thank you so much for joining us. And we hope you write your true story and use your story to grow your business.
Thank you so much. Bye.